Good afternoon and welcome to the weekly report with Tea Party Patriots Action. I'm Bill Pasco, Tea Party Patriots man in Washington, and I'll be taking you through the Washington report today. Let's get to it. The House and Senate are out of session and will not return until the week of January 5th. Last week in the House came back on Monday and voted to pass two bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday, the House passed two bills, H.R. 4371, the Kayla Hamilton Act, and H.R. 3632, the Power Plant Reliability Act. On Wednesday, the House passed a rule governing floor consideration of a number of bills. Then the House took up and considered H. Con Res 61 and H. Con Res 64, two Democrat-sponsored War Powers resolutions, both of which were aimed at prohibiting President Trump from directing the armed forces of the United States to take the actions it's been taking in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific regarding drug boats and Venezuela. Both measures failed. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 3616, the Reliable Power Act. Then the House took up and considered H.R. 6703, the Lower Health Care Premiums for All Americans Act. That's the GOP leadership health care bill. The bill passed by a vote of 216 to 211, with just one Republican, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, voting no. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 3492, the Protect Children's Innocence Act. On Thursday, the House took up H.R. 4776, the SPEED Act. After considering three amendments, none of which passed, the House passed the bill. Then the House took up H.R. 1366, the Mining Regulatory Clarity Act. Then the House took up and passed H.R. 845, the Pet and Livestock Protection Act, and H.R. 498, the Do No Harm in Medicaid Act. And then they were done. Last week in the Senate returned on Monday and voted to end debate on the motion to concur in the House amendments to the vehicle for the National Defense Authorization Act. On Wednesday, the Senate agreed to concur in the House amendment to the NDAA by a vote of 77 to 20. And for the 65th year in a row, the National Defense Authorization Act passed the Congress. Then the Senate voted to confirm the nominations of Jared Isaacman to serve as administrator of NASA. Then the Senate voted to end debate on and then to confirm the nomination of Douglas Weaver to serve as a member of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Then the Senate voted to end debate on the en bloc nominations resolution from last week, the one with 97 executive branch nominees all wrapped up in one vote. On Thursday, the Senate rejected S.J. Res. 82. That's a Congressional Review Act resolution of disapproval of the rule submitted by the Biden-era Office of the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services relating to policy on adhering to the text of the Administrative Procedures Act. Then the Senate voted to confirm the 97 nominees with one vote. Then, one at a time, the Senate teed up and voted on four consecutive motions to end debate on nominations. The nominations for Joshua Simmons to serve as General Counsel of the Central Intelligence Agency, Keith Bass to serve as Assistant Secretary of Defense, Van Hook to serve as a U.S. District Judge for the Western District of Louisiana, and Sarah Bailey to serve as Director of National Drug Control Policy. And then they were done. Now let's talk about the latest on the James Comey and Letitia James indictments. You may recall that on November 24, a federal district judge threw out the Justice Department's indictments against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James on the grounds that the prosecutor of record on the case, interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Lindsay Halligan, had been unlawfully appointed. The DOJ said at the time that it would appeal, but instead it sought new indictments against the New York Attorney General. In fact, it tried with two different grand juries, and in both cases, the grand jury failed to indict her. On Friday, the Department of Justice appealed the judge's decision to dismiss the two cases. Now to health care. As we discussed a moment ago, On Wednesday, the House took up and passed the Republican leadership's health care bill. That means that for now, at least, the GOP leadership in the House can say the House has taken a position on health care, and it is that bill. But something else of great, possibly greater significance happened on Wednesday. Wednesday morning, 4 Republican members of the House of Representatives signed Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries' discharge petition on a measure that would allow for a straight 3-year extension of the ACA premium tax credits that are expiring in 10 days. Let's take a parenthetical break for a moment and remind ourselves what exactly is a discharge petition and why it's important. One of the ways the majority controls the House is through the Speaker's control of the calendar. And by the calendar, I mean the floor schedule. Nothing gets to the floor of the House without the approval of the Speaker. For some time now, both parties have turned the Speaker's authority over the floor over to the majority leader, who acts at the Speaker's behest. So sometimes the Speaker decides a bill is so bad that after it is introduced and routed to its proper committee of jurisdiction, the chairman of the committee is instructed to let it lie. He doesn't touch it. He does nothing to advance it. He doesn't hold a hearing on it or schedule a committee meeting to discuss it and maybe amend it, what we call a markup session. In other words, the committee just leaves the bill alone and it dies a quiet death. This happens every session to thousands of bills, typically offered by the minority party. You can see why it's important to be in the majority, because it gives you control of the floor and what gets to the floor. In an age of hyper-polarized politics like the one we're in now, team members pay attention to the color of the jersey they're wearing, whether it's red or blue, and they act accordingly. But sometimes members of the majority party want to vote on a measure that the Speaker doesn't like for whatever reason. The Speaker is constantly taking the temperature of the members of his conference, figuring out where the center of gravity is. Do they dislike this measure or that measure entirely? Or are there elements that could win majority support? Can he put 2 pieces of legislation together to create a coalition, etc.? Sometimes members of the majority want to vote on a measure the Speaker opposes. That's where a discharge petition comes in. It's a document, a petition, that calls on the Speaker to discharge a given measure from the committee it was assigned to, a committee that has buried it. And if a majority of the House, 218 members, signs the petition, then because the House is a majority rules institution where on any given day 218 members can do just about anything they want, well, if that happens, then the measure is removed from the committee's control and it will go to the floor. So a discharge petition is a document of defiance. And signing a discharge petition, if you're a member of the majority party, is a big no-no. When you arrive in Washington after winning your first election to the House and you go through freshman orientation, they tell you there are 3 things you can never do if you want to remain a member in good standing of your party. First, you never vote against a rule. Second, you never vote for a motion to vacate, which is how you depose a speaker. And third, you never sign a discharge petition. Signing a discharge petition is a member's way of declaring his defiance of the Speaker. Historically, it has been done very rarely. Since 1931, when they started keeping records on this, almost 100 years ago, in total, 560 discharge petitions have been filed. 47 have secured the necessary 218 signatures. 47. Of the 47 measures that secured 218 signatures, just 26 actually went to the floor for a vote. Of the 26 times a vote was held, 19 times the measure passed the House. But in all those years, only 2 measures became law. Now, between 2011 and 2023, only 1 discharge petition succeeded in securing 218 signatures. But in the 118th Congress between 2023 and 2025, there were 3 discharge petitions that got to 218 signatures. And so far, in the 119th Congress, only 1 year in, there have been 4 discharge petitions that have gotten to 218. This is a problem for Speaker Mike Johnson, and we'll be talking about discharge petitions a lot more next year. So, back to the current discharge petition we're discussing, the Hakeem Jeffries discharge petition on a 3-year extension of the ACA enhanced premium tax credits. The 4 Republicans who signed it and got it over the top were Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Mike Lawler of New York, Rob Bresnahan of Pennsylvania, and Ryan McKenzie of Pennsylvania. The 4 Republican moderates were angry at the House Republican leadership because the House Republican leadership had on Tuesday, the day before, declared that there would be no vote on an amendment the 4 sought to provide for a 2-year extension of the Obamacare enhanced premium tax credits. That is, they wanted a vote on an amendment that would amend the Republican leadership bill. They wanted a 2-year extension of the Obamacare enhanced premium tax credits combined with income caps and anti-fraud measures. So Hakeem Jeffries will now control the floor of the House of Representatives for 1 vote in January when they return. If all 4 Republican moderates cross party lines in January to vote with the Democrats, and all the Democrats are present in the chamber and voting, then the Hakeem Jeffries 3-year ACA subsidies extension bill will pass. Then, the moderates say, the Senate can take the bill and amend it to what the moderates say will be a bipartisan compromise package, presumably a shorter extension of the subsidies, maybe 1 or 2 years, combined with lower income caps and anti-fraud measures. And then, once the amended bill passes the Senate, it will come back to the House as amended, and the House will pass it. That's what they say. That's what they think. I seriously doubt this will happen. Democrats are highly incentivized to play this one for the political advantage, and it would be to their political advantage if the subsidies were allowed to expire and Republicans were to get blamed for it. First, there's a ton of MAGA supporters who get these subsidies. Remember how these subsidies came to be in the first place. It was Democrats trying to get people in the 10 states that had not expanded their Medicaid rolls to sign up. They basically offered a bribe. Here, would you sign up if we gave it to you for free without you having to say you're on Medicaid? Take these subsidies away, and their cost of living is going to go up. Their health care premiums will spike, and they'll blame Republicans because the media is going to write that it's the Republicans' fault. So if you're a Democrat and you want to take over the House in the midterm elections, you don't want these subsidies to continue. You want them to end because you believe it will hurt the recipients and you believe they'll take it out on the Republicans. Second, the negative headlines will affect everyone, whether they're part of the 7% of the population that's actually affected by these enhanced premium tax credits or not. When every day you pick up a newspaper and see headlines that say healthcare premiums are spiking, it doesn't make any difference whether your healthcare premium is spiking or not. You think healthcare premiums are going up, period. And that affects your take on affordability. We'll talk more about the discharge petition in the new year. And that's our Washington Report for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and Merry Christmas. We won't see you again until Monday, January 5. Until then, be well and be active.